October 15th, 2011, Virtual Suzuka International Circuit, the second to last race of the iRacing NVIDIA Grand Prix Series, otherwise known as the Drivers' World Championship. If you were to ask any sim racer who the greatest sim racer of all time was, they would all say the name Gregor Hutu. And if you were to ask what the greatest sim racing country in the world was, many people would say Finland, as 5 out of the top 7 cars in the grid were from Finland, including Gregor Hutu himself. Gregor had dominated in every racing game and simulator for the past decade, leading up to even the new kid on the block, iRacing. From an outside perspective, it would be foolish for anyone to bet against him going into the season. But in this season championship, there was one driver standing between Gregor and his second iRacing championship. And this driver did not come from Finland either. In fact, where he came from, he couldn't even afford iRacing without help from his friends. Because on this day, the greatest sim racer of all time was going to be challenged by a 17-year-old student from Brazil. This is the story of Hugo Luis. Hugo Luis Camon was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to a family who was involved in media and broadcasting. From an early age, Hugo was a huge motorsports fan, along with the majority of his family. But unfortunately, none of them ever got to live out this dream in real life, as the cost of motorsports in Brazil was significantly more than the average person could afford. It was because of this, from an early age, Hugo turned to racing video games.
When I was a kid, I always loved to play Midtown Madness, and around that game, I used to use the racing modes, checkpoints, and everything. But you know, it's just a kid with a game. In 2003, I found out about NASCAR racing. I always loved how it was simulating like car traction and how the car should behave on a racetrack. That was actually when I decided to have my first racing wheel. I stayed within NASCAR racing 2003 from 2003 until 2005. That was when I figured out about Lead for Speed. And then I switched to that so I could race against other people online.
Live for Speed is a PC racing simulator that was first released in 2002 and still receives updates to this very day. Its heyday, though, was in the mid-2000s, where it competed to be the top road racing simulator along with R-Factor. And while sim racing legends such as Gregor Hutu built their repertoire starting from Grand Prix Legends and moving into R-Factor, there was a separate and just as competitive community over at Live for Speed.
There were amazing leagues in Lead for Speed. Back in the time, I remember people were introduced to proper endurance racing. We had usually would have 24 hours race happening. I mean, back in the time, you didn't have money on the line really, so you have the purely passionate racing back then.
And as the competitive scene for Live for Speed grew, so too did Hugo's drive to become the fastest. But it was never going to be quite as easy for Hugo, both because he was in Brazil and because he was only 13 years old.
Because I wasn't always like a top tier sim racer or anything like this. I mean, I got like lapped multiple times. So I kind of came from the bottom to top. And I used it to like get super frustrated because I couldn't accomplish the results I wanted. And then I remember back in 2006, I asked one of the top guys, what do I need to do? To be as quick as you. I mean, I'm getting super angry because I don't like, I keep getting like 2 seconds, 1.5 seconds away from you. I don't know what to do. What should I do? And he straight away told me, well, you need to practice and you need to know how to practice. Not just about turning laps forever. You need to know when to stop as well. Because it's all down to like the muscle memory and everything. When I saw that, okay, maybe I have a chance to fight against them, then I started to push a bit harder in terms of studying what is involved in getting quicker.
And through Hugo's determination, curiosity, and willingness to ask questions to better drivers, he slowly but surely made his way up the ladder.
There was a little bit of story from 2006 until 2009. Because back in 2006, when I started to participate in competitive leagues, that was that period that I mentioned to you where I was frustrated with my performance. And then from there, I was working my way into trying to get better. And that's when in 2008, I was invited to join My3ID Gaming. Well, the founding members from Kwanda Esports today are basically mostly from My3ID back in the time. So I was blessed enough to be invited to the team back in the time, thanks to the performance I was able to achieve with the help of the team as well, because they helped me a lot to find the extra attempts that I couldn't find.
But after joining a formal team environment in sim racing, soon enough, speed became the least of Hugo's issues.
I didn't speak English at all, so it was always like Google Translation and everything. I was always super afraid of going to TeamSpeak to be along with the team because I couldn't really interact. Like writing was already a problem. Dare me trying to listen and talk. But yeah, learning English was literally 100% from that experience as well. Like I didn't go through a school or anything for English.
So after fully settling into My3ID, Hugo joined the ranks of their GT2 team primarily. And while My3ID was considered a top team in Live for Speed, they were rarely in contention for championships or race wins at the time. That is, until the biggest race of the year, Live for Speed's 24-hour endurance race at a fictional track called Aston.
The 24 hours of Aston, we entered with My3ID in the GT2 class. We entered with one of the cars that nobody likes. Back in the time, it was the XR GTR. It was the only car with turbo engines, and some people really thought that car wasn't the favorite. But we were really working hard into the car setup, and in the race we were very surprised with the pace we got. We were able to do world record laps during the race stint. We were very happy with that result, and I still remember that as one of the big accomplishments back in the time.
But just to show how far Hugo had come individually along this time, he got an award that wasn't just based on his team results.
Very happy that the community nominated me the driver of the year in 2009, and then that was when I transitioned to iRacing with the goal of trying to qualify myself for the Drivers' World Championship.
At the time, iRacing gave many reasons for the top drivers to switch to their racing sim, whether it be the real-life cars, the real-life tracks, or the promise of real-life prizing in a pro series, the first of its kind other than some one-off events in previous years on different games. But Hugo was not as quick to jump to iRacing as some did even all the way back in 2008. Not because he didn't want to, but because of iRacing's infamous subscription model.
And in Brazil, the currency it's not the strongest currency in the planet, so it was very difficult to get a subscription and everything. But with the help from a few friends, I was able to subscribe to a few months, and then it was in the late of 2009 that I was able to finally try iRacing.
Luckily for Hugo, though, he found that many of the things that he learned over in Live for Speed transferred almost immediately over to iRacing.
I had a very good impression from iRacing from the get-go, and that was basically why I switched basically straight away. LFS was a great introduction to who was going to iRacing because of the tire model, and I think the way that you drove the car was very similar.
But because Hugo joined too late into 2009, he could not compete in iRacing's first ever Road Pro Series, the iRacing Drivers' World Championship Grand Prix Series. The inaugural season for this championship was run in 2010 with the Dallara IR05, which was an IndyCar. The series, though, was modeled after Formula 1 and not after IndyCar, with 18 rounds at road courses ranging from 40 to 60 laps. But heading into the first season, even at the time, there was only one name that people feared. A name that had already crafted a legacy before iRacing even started. a name that had already become synonymous with the greatest sim racer of all time. And that name is Gregor Hutu.
Gregor found what discipline means way before everyone as well. So that's why he was kind of undefeatable.
Gregor Hutu was a sim racer from Finland and the flagship driver of Team Redline, who even back then was known as the top team in all of sim racing. And even with the lofty expectations placed on Gregor going into the season, he blew all of these expectations out of the water by fashioning one of the most dominant seasons in racing esports and all of esports history. Gregor Hutu won the first 14 races of the Drivers' World Championship, a series that was supposed to compile the best road sim racers in the entire world. Gregor Hutu made them look all like amateurs. He claimed pole position, he got the fastest lap in his first 13 races. He finally lost the pole to Richard Towler in race 14, but still got the win. And then finally, in race 15, just to prove to us that he wasn't some divine being, he got 4th place. But the race after, he was back with the pole position, fastest lap, and the race winner, like there was a vendetta against him. And in an absolutely ridiculous move, he didn't even show up for the last 2 races because he had already clinched the championship. There was nothing else that his competitors could even do. Because in the Drivers' World Championship, there are 2 drop weeks, meaning that your 2 lowest scored point totals get dropped. They don't count against you. But if Gregor would have showed up for the final 2 races and won even one of them, Gregor would have had a mathematically perfect season. And statistically, there is no way that he wouldn't have won at least one of those 2 races. Gregor Hutu had sent a message to the world of sim racing that he was the greatest, and it wasn't particularly even close. Next year's championship battle was going to be for 2nd place, and joining that race would be Hugo. A quick note, I would consider all of the Pro Series races 2013 and prior to be lost media, meaning that they can't be viewed publicly. If you have any information on how to watch these race recordings of Pro Series races, let me know because I would love to restore that part of sim racing history. And also, I would really appreciate it if you guys enjoyed the video to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a ton, and I put a ton of effort into these videos. All right, thank you.
I got really used to be an endurance racer, and then I used it to hate open wheel cars as well, especially because, during my whole sim racing career, I only drove GT cars, but then you see the fact that, okay, in the World Championship, you have to drive the Dallara IndyCar, and then, oh wait, we are releasing an F1 car now. Yeah, it's quite different, but especially when the Pro series back in the time was using the V8 supercars, that has nothing to do with that. So it was quite a shift. But yeah, I was able to adapt. It was quite a difference. The cool thing is that, with the Williams FW31, there wasn't a lot of in-car adjustments that you have to do in the steering wheel, but it was quite a shift in terms of the driving style and especially the mentality during the race. Sometimes, in endurance race, especially you have to be always careful with the tires. You need to be super precise. But when you talk about sprint races, when you have 44 laps in Spa, for example, you need to be more aggressive.
And even though the team was new to the series, they were quickly building a name for themselves to be the main competitors to Team Redline.
Of course, when you see the qualifying series and when you think about the previous season, you already build up, okay, who are the favorites? But it's very difficult to imagine how you would do in comparison to these guys because you never drove directly against them. The only benchmark that you had is your teammates. Yes, in Niminen, one of my teammates, he ran some of the qualifying series races in the IndyCar, and he was very competitive in relation to Gregor. That was the only benchmark that I had. So when I was closer to Yee-J in the practice sessions, I knew that, okay, maybe Gregor is doing the same thing. But I never expected that I would be qualifying on top 5 or anything like this, because I would never expect myself to be on that level.
Going into the first race of the 2011 iRacing Grand Prix Series, now known as the NVIDIA Series, there were a lot of unknowns, the most important one being the car they were driving. The IR05 that Gregor Hutu seemingly had mastered was replaced with the brand new Williams FW31, and everybody had the same amount of time to practice on that car. And when the dust settled at Spa, at the conclusion of Season 2, Race 1, a shockwave went through the sim racing community. The winner, Jesse Niemanen of My3ID Gaming. Second place, Gregor Hutu. And third place, Hugo Luis.
I think I overperformed, to be honest. I wasn't expecting that result, ever. If I would expect a top 5, that would be already a very big thing for me. And then when during the qualifying, when I saw that I qualified, I think it was P4 or something, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't mess it up during the race. And then we had a very good start, a very good launch. Gregor, for example, had a very bad launch in the start of the race, so he lost a few positions. So we were like, okay, that's the chance that we can do it. So we were able to put a lot of the team cars in the front rows. I couldn't believe it until like very end of the race, when I was always seeing like, okay, you are P3. I was like, oh man, that's like a dream. So we need to keep pushing, not do anything silly until the end of the race. I was so cautious during the race that I think back in time it was really during the because of the off-track limits in iRacing with the F1, it was really hard to do a race without an off-track. But I was trying to be so cautious during the race that I think I only had one incident point during the whole race. Yeah, I mean, when I finished the race, I was like, oof, okay, that was way better than I expected. So maybe this season can give us something really good. But I was never expecting more than that.
But if the first race of the season proved anything, it was that this championship was not going to be a runaway from the GOAT. It was going to be a battle. And as things started to get more serious, Hugo started to lean more and more on his team manager.
Jack Basford as the team manager. And when himself, along with the team, found out that we had the chance to do something different, so everyone really worked hard towards it. He then started to ask, how is your sleeping schedule looking like? Oh, it's a mess. Like I sleep at any given time. When they realize, oh wait, so having a proper sleeping schedule can help you. Oh, okay. There is a very interesting book. Speed limits. Okay. Let's give this a read. And then I was never into reading, and English was always a problem. Then I decided, thanks to our team manager, to read an 80-page book. I think most of the people know that book, Speed Secrets. And that worked because I learned how important it was to be fit, to like have my body well fit, how to sleep well, how to stay hydrated, what to do before the races to like keep focused, what to think before and after the races. Those were things that I had to learn to be quick.
In the second race of the season, Hugo had a more lackluster result of 12th place, but in the third race at Zandvoort, he was back on the podium and now one step higher in second place. And while his speed was already fairly competitive, one place that his team improved on from the previous season was fuel strategy and tire strategy.
In the previous season, that all the tire strategy was always like you had always very linear and similar stints. Okay, maybe we do a super short first stint, then we do a little bit longer middle stints or something different like that. So we tried to do those moves during that season, which really paid off with the results.
And for the fourth race of the season at Barber Motorsport Park, Hugo broke through another barrier, getting pole position and leading at the beginning and middle stages of the race.
I was very comfortable on that race because we had the top 3 cars from the team basically very close to each other. So the race was under control. And it was it postponed the chance of getting a victory for myself during that race. There was a back marker who went out of the track in T1. And I was on his way. So basically, he had a mistake, and I couldn't avoid him. And yeah, that was very disappointing back in the day.
Hugo again would have to wait for his world championship win, and he would get tantalizingly close over and over. In the first 8 races, he had 5 podiums with 3 second place finishes, and that's not even including that 4th race where he was leading and got crashed out. The championship contenders were also starting to set themselves apart from the field, and while there were still 2 drop weeks for every driver, you could see who was trending towards that championship and who was falling away. The driver who was in the best position was actually Hugo's teammate, Klaus Kivikas, who had won 2 races and only had 1 bad finish that would be used for a drop week. Hugo's other teammate, Jesse Niemanen, had even more wins with 3, but with 4 bad results to this point, meaning that he would be stuck with at least 2 of them no matter what. Gregor Hutu was still in contention as well. He had 2 wins, but 3 bad finishes, meaning that he would be stuck with 1 of them. And finally, Hugo, though he didn't have a win up to this point, had a bunch of consistent finishes, but still had 2 poor finishes that he would use for his drop weeks if there were no worse finishes. But the turning point for Hugo's season was at week 9 at Sebring International Raceway.
We were struggling with the car setup. Yeah, the expectations were not high for that one. But then on Friday, the one day before the race, we finally could figure out what was wrong with the car. But still, the expectations wouldn't be for a win because the red line was always very quick. But then that's one of the races that we try to play a little bit more with the strategy. For example, having the first stint really long in comparison to Gregor. So we calculated that, okay, maybe if we have a good launch and we are able to stay within a few seconds with Gregor at the front, that means that, okay, for the second stint, we refuel really low for maybe do like 5 or 9 laps on the second stint. So we are able to overtake him on the pit stop. That would be perfect if you leave the pit in front of him, because that means that you have a free track ahead of you and you can just hot lap. Yeah, we were happy that that was the case. I was able to overtake him in the pit stop and just open the gap from now on. And then luckily, like, it was just enough to open enough gap to then when I had to stop again the pit stop, I came in front of him with the car being heavier and Sebring being very tricky to pass with the F1. That was when the first victory came. Oh, it was incredible. It was unbelievable because I was waiting. I mean, just in the beginning of the season, I mean, you had 0 expectations, right? And then when you have the first 3 races, okay, the pace is getting good, you have the chance. Then you do a pole position. So you know by that time that you have the chance to have the victory. But the victory was never there. So when it finally happened, oh man, it was an indescribable feeling. It was really good. It was really good. When you have your first victory, that opens your mind in a way that it changed your mindset completely, because now you know by fact that you can win a race.
Heading into the final third of the season, if Hugo wanted a shot at the title, he would have to be perfect with no breathing room with his drop weeks.
After the half-season mark, I started to consider that there was a chance. I wasn't 100% confident that it would be possible, but after, the points are starting to build up and you see, mathematically you can fight for it, then I started to believe it.
With only 6 races left in the season, Gregor Hutu came back to remind everyone why he was considered the greatest sim racer ever. He would be consistent, he would be fast, and he wouldn't make any mistakes. But this time, there was something different. This time, there was a boy from Brazil who would use all of his lessons learned, starting from the bottom and coming up, to put together one of the greatest strings of races ever in sim racing. Mid-Ohio, Spa, Road America, Okayama. Gregor Hutu would finish second place to Hugo Luis's first.
During those 4 races, I was living in a very bad personal situation. Like there were a lot of things happening in my personal life, which was really affecting me, like mentally speaking. That said, I decided to put my full focus on that because sim racing was always my passion. And okay, if there is something that can keep me busy, it's practicing and maintaining myself focused. And that was exactly when those 4 races, that win streak came, because I didn't think about anything else apart from doing my best to accomplish what I was aiming for. And that completely changed the way how I focused on the race, because even like during the whole championship until that point, there would be some moments where, okay, you would commit a little bit of a mistake, you would lose time. But during that period, I was so focused in trying to get myself in the most perfect position as possible and try to forget all the problems I was going through in my personal life. That was when those wins happened. So basically, that's one of the things that I keep telling the guys today, that when you have the correct motivation, when you have the full focus on what you are doing, there's nothing that can stop you.
Again, it was a mixture of speed and strategy that allowed Hugo to have these performances.
I mean, the strategy stuff really worked well the whole season as well. There were races that we were able to, I think it was either Okayama or Mid-Ohio, where we tried a completely different strategy in comparison to the other guys. Like, there was a few races where Redline would go for a 3-stopper, and we decided to go for a 1-stopper. Yeah, the full focus was, okay, maybe they are not expecting us to do a 1-stop at all, so maybe let's try to get the perfect launch and get in front of them, because that will completely screw up the speed on track. And that was the case for some of those races. So I think that's one of the big marks about that season for me, because that was the season where everything was different to what was ever experienced before in sim racing, where you could have like real strategies that could really break into a difference. And you have a completely new car, with like almost totally reliant on aerodynamic. So that's one of my biggest highlights about that season, where everything was new, and then it was the race literally to see who would figure out the car. And I think along with figuring out the car, that's how we were able to do, I think, the whole mentality as well, and trying to do things differently and more professionally always helped as well.
And by the end of that stretch of races, the championship was now a 2-horse race. Gregor Hutu and Hugo Luis. Mathematically speaking, Hugo just needed to average a 6th place finish over the next 2 races, or finish at least 2nd in one of the races, to bank in the amazing rookie championship.
People, when they see a Brazilian winning races, I think most of the people think that the mentality is the same from Senna. But I am not a Senna guy, and I don't like to be super aggressive. I mean, sometimes in the correct moments you have to be aggressive, of course. But I mean, you have everything under control in the last 2 rounds. I mean, the only thing that you need to do is to finish the race. If that's the case, okay, I would just finish the race.
But sometimes a simple 2nd place finish is easier said than done.
I was shaking. Like, I just had to make sure that, okay, I can finish 3rd, I can finish 2nd. I can just stay here. I don't need to push for a win, because it's better to secure like a good position than just crashing trying to win the race, you know? I mean, you know that if you do anything wrong, everything can just go down the rail. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everything would be confirmed. But yeah, when you cross the line and you know that, okay, things are going your way, it's a big relief, because sometimes, I mean, people don't really realize the amount of time that is put into like practicing and getting involved into like competitive scene in sim racing.
Even with Gregor putting maximum pressure on Hugo by winning round 17 at Suzuka, it did not faze Hugo. And when he rounded the final corner and crossed the finish line, he knew that he did something incredible.
Yeah, when you're finally able to clinch a result that can guarantee you the title, for example, you can see that all the efforts were worth it. Because back in the time, we didn't have like big sponsorships, we didn't have salaries or anything like this. So basically being a champion means that you have to work your whole way through to make sure that you get this prize to cover the time that you practice for. And that's not even guaranteed, because you don't know if you're going to be the champion or not. And for the situation I was living in personally back in the time, they know that things in Brazil are not easy. So it was a big relief, like in many different ways of life. Yeah, trying to do something better for my family as well. I mean, I was able to finish some work that was needed to be done in the house to conclude the building. So yeah, it was a big relief.
But that is just a reminder of what people back then were racing for. Above all else, they were racing for the love of sim racing and the competition. Even the chance to earn some money was exhilarating for any sim racer. But at that time, even if you were the world champion, it just wasn't enough to live off of.
So it was really hard to justify the time that you spend in sim racing versus what you need to spend in your real life to get your lifestyle covered. So basically, I didn't have sim racing a full-time job, of course, because that wasn't possible back in the time. So I had another full-time job, but that was when at the same time, 1 year later, I decided to focus as well that, okay, maybe I can use the sim racing experience to help sim racing a little bit more to accomplish that professionalism that it requires to build up a lifestyle for the people that are involved as well.
And that is when a few years later, in 2015, after racking up 17 wins in the iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series, Hugo retired and started RaceSpot TV, which would quickly become regarded as one of the premier sim racing broadcasting and service providers in the space.
I think it was worth it, stopping sim racing, especially because, I mean, when you're a competitive person and you cannot put in the practice time that you want, it's really frustrating as well. And nobody likes to lose. When you start winning, it's impossible to okay, now I just do this for fun. I mean, for me, unfortunately, it doesn't work like this. So I was like, okay, maybe I do something that will bring something to sim racing. So we keep working hard today to do this, but we are getting there.
But regardless of where Hugo goes in the world of sim racing, he will always be an iRacing world champion. One who came from nothing and built his way up through sheer will and determination to go toe-to-toe with the king of sim racing and ultimately steal his crown.
I can only be very grateful for everything that sim racing has provided me today, because literally everything that I do today is thanks to what I learned in sim racing. If I speak another language, a second language, that's thanks to sim racing. If I'm able to have a good self-discipline to know how to maintain myself focused to achieve, that's thanks to sim racing somehow. And even the broadcast industry, I had experience, of course, in real life broadcast industry since very young in Brazil. But most of the broadcast stuff that I do today is for sim racing. So everything today is always running around sim racing. So I think we can always be very grateful for not only sim racing itself, but also for the teams, for the organizations, and for the people that since the era when everything was just the dinosaur era in sim racing, everyone was always fighting hard to make it a good place to be. So I can always be very grateful.